Every season of Survivor is a story. There are main characters, sidekicks, comic reliefs, and villains. A good season of Survivor tells a good story. It will grip you and have you rooting for someone and against someone else. You will want to tune in episode after episode to see what happens next until it all finishes with a hopefully satisfying conclusion. Each story that we look at together will go through one character's journey from beginning to end, from the time that they are introduced until they inevitably get their torch snuffed or win the game. We will look at every character moment and strategic move to determine whether they were a hero or a villain and whether they were a good or bad strategist. And with that, welcome to Once Upon an Island. For reference, we will be observing only what the TV show is showing us and what story is being told through the show. No future seasons will be mentioned, as the story and characters here have no idea and therefore are unaffected by those future seasons. All character moments and strategic moves are interpreted with the mindset of what the story is trying to tell us. I will not be interpreting it with a modern Survivor mindset. Therefore, someone flip-flopping in a classic season may be smart, but it would portray them as a villain. Whereas in a modern season, this would be smart and it would not reflect poorly on them as a person. Now with that out of the way, let's open the book on Brian Heidik of Survivor Thailand.
39 days, 16 people, 1 survivor.
Before we start, I want to thank you all for supporting this channel. If you want to see these videos weeks before they are ever released here on YouTube, then consider supporting this channel on Patreon. That Patreon also gets you access to the audio files for our Survivor podcast, and you get to pick which survivors I tell the stories of. Thank you for your support. Brian Heidik, a 34-year-old used car salesman, was the winner of Survivor's 5th season, Survivor Thailand. When he won, it had seemed like an inevitability, as he had dominated everyone in the game, including his own tribal alliances. So how does someone outpace 15 other players so easily, not even making it clear who is in second place? Let's find out. First impressions are everything, and Brian Heidik tells us that he has one goal in mind: to win the game. So how is he going to approach these 39 days in order to do that?
I'm trying to figure everybody out. I'm gonna have a good time doing it, but at the same time, this is a business trip, as I like to say.
But despite that being the first time we hear him talk to us, he is actually introduced to us in the show when he tells us that he's a used car salesman at the very beginning of the game, when Jeff Probst tells everyone, say what your name is and what you do. This elicits a snicker from Sheehan.
Hello, I'm Brian. I'm 34, and I'm in the Highline world of used car sales.
This season marks the first time Survivor does a schoolyard pick for tribes. Brian is picked for the seemingly weaker / older tribe, which seems bad at first, but in these early days in the game, it makes him less likely to go home since he will be seen as valuable in the challenges.
That has music.
Brian,
Come on down. I
comes
can't
with
sing
guitar.
We don't hear much from Brian in the premiere, but his tribe does lose the immunity challenge. So we go to Tribal Council, where Jeff asks Brian a question about how it is to assimilate with new people, and Brian gives an answer that starts with what Jeff asks and ends with him saying that it's just all about love, man. It's a great non-answer to Jeff's question.
In your profession as a used car salesman, do you have an advantage, do you think, in assimilating with strangers?
No, really get to know people, and it's all about love.
John the pastor ends up going home, and Brian votes with the majority on this.
John, the tribe has spoken. It's time for you to go.
So far through one episode, we don't see much of Brian as a person at all. He has been all business-like so far, however his strategic game is good, and he seems to be the first person to play this game with a business mindset since Richard Hatch. So far, he has kept things close to the chest and is not a person who will probably share their feelings or opinions openly. It will be interesting if anyone can garner a true emotional reaction out of him. Episode 2 begins with Brian playing the guitar and Ted singing, causing this lighthearted moment at camp.
I wish I had some steak with some mashed potatoes.
Oh my God, Ted, that's my favorite song.
Aside from that, not much else happens with Brian this episode. He gives 2 boring confessionals about Tanya and Jan that reveals absolutely nothing about him or his strategy, but his tribe does lose immunity again, and when he goes to vote, he says,
like an older brother would to a younger sister, gotta take care of you, gotta make sure you get a full meal tonight. So Tanya, need you to get better, okay? Enjoy. Talk to you soon.
For the first time in any of these stories so far, I don't know what to say. Is Brian being sarcastic? Is he being for real? Nothing on this show has told us that he and Tanya have any sort of close relationship. Heck, I can't remember the time him and Tanya have just talked. So him calling her his sister is confusing. Is that really the reason he is sending her home? It seems like just another version of what we saw at the last tribal council when he gave Jeff that non-answer. I think Brian is just BSing for BSing's sake at this point. However, he does vote with the majority and Tanya goes home.
Tanya, the tribe has spoken.
Episode 3 has Chewy winning a reward and netting them a visit from the Red Berets, who are going to come to their camp and help them improve their lifestyle. Now, for contextual purposes, I do need to briefly mention the grinding incident between Gandia and Ted. They had been super close all game, and Gandia and Ted seem to have an island husband-wife relationship going on. They both have spouses at home, and it doesn't seem sexual, just intimate. However, one night, Ted grinded on Gandia, and the next morning she brings this up to him, and he apologizes. She accepts the apology, and they move on. Okay, now that we're all up to speed, let's continue.
Can you forgive me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're a good person, Ted.
And don't worry, you don't have to worry about that. Not ever happening again.
Brian tells us how there is a genuine feeling of niceness at their camp, and that makes it easy to be genuine. This really says a lot about their tribe, that they can be nice to each other after already having voted out 2 people, and the grinding incident between Gandia and Ted had just occurred.
We're all feeling very comfortable with each other, so it's not hard to be genuine. Ooh, not bad. No, good. Not bad.
Brian follows up this comment by saying that when the niceness and trust leaves, then there will be problems within their camp.
Once that genuinity goes away, or the lack of trust goes away, then there's going to be problems.
Later on, Helen informs Brian about the Ted and Gandia incident, and Brian says, wow, but his emotions don't really match his words.
What?
That's kind of serious, yeah. That's why she's been depressed all day. But
Wow.
I guess
Brian follows this up with Ted and asks Ted if nothing happened, and Ted says yes.
Nothing happened, all right? No, okay, nothing at all. Nothing happened at all.
Good. That's all.
That's the thing that's
all I need to
tripping me
hear.
up, man.
All I need to hear.
It seems like Brian has no real desire to find out about the incident at all, and takes Ted's side immediately. He doesn't really investigate it. It comes across as completely uncaring about it.
Ted told me that nothing happened, which he was denying anything happened, which is fine because nothing did happen.
While talking with Ted, Brian tells us that when talking with others, you gotta listen and stay cool, like Cool Hand Luke.
You got to remember to keep that character cool, like Cool Hand Luke. Just keep it cool.
He says that listening is one of the most important skills in Survivor. This is very indicative of who he is and how he thinks, and he's spot on. Listening is one of the most important skills you can use in Survivor.
I think one of the most important skills, especially out here, is just listening, taking it all in, not saying much.
Gandia and Ted end up blowing up, and this is after the apology and the hug and the accepting of it. And they have a public fight. And in the midst of this, Brian tells the Red Berets that they're lucky they don't know English because there's a lot of BS going on around that camp.
I am 150 to 200% happy with the wife that I have.
Remember, if you can understand how much both going on around this camp, you don't understand. Actually, it's good that you don't understand what's going on because there's a lot of both going on.
Chewy does win immunity, so we move on to episode 4, where we learn that things have not died down. The Ted and Gandia incident has just caused a big rift in the tribe. Multiple people have indicated that there is now a male-female split in the tribe, which is night and day from last episode when everyone was nice and trusting.
We really have split into a men's, women's group.
And the boys go off to play the blame game, and the gals go off to get food.
The men aren't pulling their weight or offering, can I help do something?
Brian seems to have not done anything to try and bridge that gap. This is a pure editing moment, but Helen says that she hopes the boys are out looking for food, But they aren't. They're just sitting around chilling.
Hopefully the guys are down looking for clams. I told Clay, you know, you can turn over rocks and find clams, so I'm hoping that's what they're doing.
Oh, boy. Lordy.
I'm putting an order in for a bigger butt next life.
After that, Brian makes a sexist joke about the women being in the kitchen and serving the men.
Well, I think that's just the natural transition in life. Ladies in the kitchen and the men take care of business and do all the fishing. That resorts back to thousands and thousands of years.
While this would be funny to a select audience in 2002, it's still sexist no matter when it was.
They naturally went to their duties, which is cooking and cleaning. And actually, I got some clothes I had them wash too. Let me go talk to ladies.
Chewie loses immunity, and everyone is scrambling to figure out who they want to go home. Gandia suggests Ted or Clay, but doesn't mention Brian. In fact, no one mentions Brian while figuring out which guy to target.
As far as my vote's concerned, it's a toss-up between Ted and Clay. They're basically like Mutt and Jeff, frickin' frack.
As it turns out, Gandia's suggestion doesn't matter, as she is voted out 4-2 in an attempt to reunify the tribe.
Gandia, tribe has spoken.
Stay strong, y'all. See ya.
Episode 5 begins and Ted goes fishing with Brian. While on this aquatic expedition, he offers Brian an alliance, and Ted is totally committed to Brian until the very end.
One of the things we got to kind of do is have each other's back. He's confirmed that yes, he is totally committed to me all the way to the end, and I'm totally committed to him all the way to the end.
Brian follows this up by saying that thinking before you speak is very important in the game of Survivor.
It's the thinking before you speak and act. That's extremely important. So you just have to remind yourself every day what you're doing out here.
He states that he wants to remain low-key and shark-like, doing whatever he needs to do to remain within the majority.
I know I'm very low-key, very subtle, but very shark-like, very swift. Move when I need to move, speak when I need to speak.
Chewie wins immunity, so they don't go to tribal council. Moving on to episode 6, Brian and Ted re-emphasize their secret alliance. Brian says it's important to keep it a secret to see if anyone is playing them. Whether that is his actual goal or not, keeping the alliance a secret is a great way to keep the target off of both of their backs.
Still in play?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool.
What we really want to do is just kind of be very low-keyed. No one needs to know of our strong friendship, and we're kind of just seeing if anybody's playing us.
Not long after that, Jan finds a dead baby bat on the ground. This causes a strong emotional reaction from her.
I know it's silly, but I feel sorry for him. So I buried him and he's happy.
But no one else seems to truly care.
Yeah, I feel bad if a kitten dies, but I'm looking at this slimy back on, yeah, okay, that's real sad. You know, bury that thing before flies get all over it.
Including Brian, who says that his only thought was whether they could eat it or not.
She wanted to have a funeral and named it Oscar, and was quite sad about the little bat. That I was curious if we could eat it or not. That was my first words out of my mouth.
Once again, Chewie wins immunity. And episode 7 typically means the merge is coming. It has meant that in the past 4 seasons. Both tribes are tied at 5 members apiece, so it should be very interesting. Jeff gathers both tribes together and tells them to pick a beach and that they will both be living on it together. To be clear, he never says there is a merge. Everyone just assumes that.
Today, something very different is happening. The 2 tribes will now live together on one beach.
However, I have covered this in depth in 2 previous videos. For the sake of this video, just know that everyone is operating under the assumption that they have merged, even though they officially have not and no one's told them that they have. They are just 2 tribes living on the same beach together.
It was a huge, successful merger of 2 tribes.
When Sukjai arrives at the Chewie beach, Brian humorously remarks how they are entering his kingdom. Despite the humor, it comes across as arrogant as well.
Well, it's great to welcome everybody in my kingdom. I love opening up my house. Mi casa es tu casa. They're in my house now.
During the celebration and festivities of the assumed merge, Brian gets a little drunk and plays guitar.
The way you feel about me, and I'm seeing you here and there, but the same.
This is one of the rare humanizing moments for him in the season, and it's the first human moment we've gotten for him through the first 7 episodes.
He's talking about the moons and girls and this and that. I was like, oh, no, he's gone. He's a goner.
However, after playing guitar, drunk Brian is talking to Ted and still somehow has his head in game mode, which impresses Ted.
Watch out for NYC. Watch out for NYC. It's all a big game.
It was amazing that he still had that strategy in his mind, even though he was strong.
Keep a lookout.
The next morning, Brian claims that he saw his good friend Hurling Freddy,
I think I was hurling. I was talking to my good friend Hurling Freddy.
but also claims that by doing this, it makes him seem more human to everyone else. While he is right, he says this as if it was his goal, when in all actuality, it seems like he's just making up a good reason the next day for his behavior the night before. Still an overall good thing for his game, and the joke was dad-worthy.
So I happen to have a little too much wine, a little too many crackers, but at the same time it shows everyone I'm human and I'm one of them.
Brian then says how his leadership is low-key and subtle, and that he is aware of what everyone is doing and thinking.
I've got a very subtle form of leadership. It's very low-key, it's very understated. I know exactly what's going on.
No matter how true it is about him knowing everything that's going on, it is good that he is staying on top of trying to know what everyone is thinking and what the next move is.
For an hour or two I didn't last night, but most of the time I do.
Immediately after that, him and Chewie have identified Xi'an as the most likely to flip from Sukjai to turn the numbers in their favor and break the tie that currently stands at 5-5.
You got a new family. Just remember that. And Amy Clay loves you, Helen loves you, Ted loves you, we all love you.
Brian is the closer in this deal, as Xi'an has previously poured her heart and soul to Clay Jordan and Ted, who both listened and treated her very well.
I've told Chewie that I'm on board. I've told them to their face that I'm on board.
Despite this great move, we will never know how the vote would have gone down, as at the immunity challenge, Jeff reveals,
You said merge.
Yes.
I certainly didn't say anything to give you that impression, did I? Sukjai with 5 members, Chewie with 5 members. The 2 tribes never merged.
they haven't merged at all, and the tribes are still duking it out. Sukjai loses the immunity challenge and votes out Xi'an, knowing she had intentions to flip. Now with a 5-4 lead, the biggest question is, when is the merge, and can Chewie hold the lead until then? Episode 8 begins, and it is still the night that Xi'an gets voted out when we see Brian completely forget her name.
There is a lot of tension. Like I said, if they vote off Suyi, Sinjun, they're not thinking.
And while it is pretty funny that he does, no one calls him out on this. But it shows a true lack of caring for someone he said was a part of their family just earlier that same day.
And Amy Clay loves you, Helen loves you, Ted loves you, we all love you.
Upon Sukjai's return to camp, Brian tells us that he still sees them as the enemy and his competition.
Of course, when I look at Sukjai, I see enemy. I see other tribe. I see who we've been competing with for these last so many weeks here.
This is a different mindset from everyone else who views them as part of the family and has told us so far. Though this mindset could cause him to act cold towards others and hurt him in the end.
I can't just all of a sudden, oh, great, one happy family. I love you guys. Hello. It's not going to happen. They're going to have to earn that respect. It's still sort of like sleeping with the enemy. So that's a little bit of a weird feeling.
The next morning, the women are cleaning everyone's pots and eating utensils, and Brian observes how, despite all of mankind's progress, the women still enjoy being domesticated and doing chores.
It's interesting to me, even after being out here in the wilderness, after hundreds of thousands of years, the girls are still doing very domesticated, and they enjoy it.
While he presents this as an observance, he does crack a joke about it, and it just isn't a great look.
Kind of resorts back to like the good old days when the men just ate and the women did all the cooking and cleaning, which I think is great.
We then learn that Helen incessantly talks about cooking recipes and is driving Jake from Sukjai up the wall. So him and Brian bond by going out and fishing and just getting away from the women.
Swedish almond bars. You start out with your cookie sheet, you put the toasted almonds all over the bottom, pour the batter on top. Like, I'll sprinkle raisins around on that. I love
I'm not
raisins.
a big raisin person.
Yeah.
Brian tells us that this is a welcome change and inserts some more pun-based humor here.
Jake and I like to get out. I kind of getting a little bit of cabin fever, or if they want to call it out here, a little cave fever. I'm going stir cavey.
While Jake and Brian are out and about, he gives Jake no strategic information. However, Jake feels much closer to Brian after they go fishing and feels good about him. He tells us to Ken, who says he likes him too.
Brian, he's a good guy.
Yeah, I like him.
However, Ken does follow up saying that he likes him by saying, hey, don't believe everything Brian is saying, since he is a used car salesman and used car salesmen love to sell lemons.
Don't believe everything he says.
Yeah, I'm not.
Just remember he's a used car dealer. What do they sell? They sell lemons.
At the immunity challenge, the tribes still have not merged, and Brian wins it for Chewie.
Jake is up. Chewy Gone wins immunity.
This ensures that they will now have a 5-3 lead. Episode 9 kicks off and everyone's doing impressions, and Brian does a great impression of Ken from Sukjai.
By the way, I just want to make sure everyone knows I am a New York police officer, one of his finest, and Jeff, how's my hair look? Yo, 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 yo.
At the reward challenge, it finally happens and the two tribes are now merged.
Sukjai and Chewy Gone are no more.
Thank you.
The 8 of you are now one tribe from here to the end.
But strategically, it doesn't matter since Chewy Gone has a 5-3 lead, and no one on Chewy Gone has shown any indication that they want to flip, unlike Xian, who had shown indications probably the entire time leading up to her deciding she was going to flip. Each of the castaways gets to see a part of the tape that their loved ones sent them. Predictably, everyone has strong emotional reactions when they see their loved ones on video, except Brian, who remains strangely quiet and unemotional when seeing his wife and child. He does win the reward challenge, which now means that everyone gets to watch the entire tape his wife sent. He weirdly apologizes for her to everyone before it begins.
Got your name on it?
Hey, if my wife does anything embarrassing, I apologize. She's a little crazy.
During the tape, his wife reveals that they are loaded. They have nice cars, and she does a sexy dance. It makes for a very awkward watch, and the music and the editing makes it even more awkward. And it causes a lot of questions in everyone's minds about whether he needs the million or not.
The nice 2 brand new cars in the garage and the baby grand piano. It looks like Brian's doing pretty damn good for himself.
Also, Brian makes snide remarks to his wife as he watches the tape.
The house is a real mess.
Why'd you clean up?
It almost makes you wonder why he purposely won the reward when he seemingly didn't care about the tape when he first saw it, and he seems like he doesn't want anyone else to see it.
She kept her clothes on, which I was happy about. I didn't want everyone to know more about me than they should. I didn't think it was necessary for them to see my family.
After the reward, Ted decides he wants to spend some alone time on the boat. This gives everyone the chance to start plotting against him, and Brian notes how it is interesting how the littlest things can trigger people.
It's just so interesting to me how such a small, minute thing out here can really escalate into a bigger problem down the road.
While Ted is out, Clay Jordan offers Brian an alliance, a secret alliance. Brian seems to be in good with everyone from Chewy Gone.
We're just trying to get him, we got to get him on the jury. That'll secure me and you, immunity all the way in. Just march right on in there. I mean, that will secure us all the way to the top 2.
Okay.
Jake and Ken then try to figure out a way to get the numbers in their favor so that Sukjai isn't systematically eliminated one by one. They decide on targeting Brian because they have figured out that out of everyone in Chewy Gone, Brian is guaranteed to win if he gets to the final 2.
We gotta get rid of him. The plan's pretty simple. We get rid of Brian, and we get rid of Brian tonight.
This is the first time all season anyone has considered targeting Brian, and the first time someone recognizes that he's playing a winning game.
Brian's a class act, so the idea is to get rid of the real strong person.
It is all for naught, as Chewy Gone has the numbers and votes out Ken 5-3, pretty much guaranteeing that Brian has a straight shot to the final 5.
Ken, the tribe has spoken. Time for you to go.
Episode 10 begins, and Ted is perplexed why he received the 3 votes from Sukjai out of everyone that they could have picked. Clay and Brian play dumb, but Clay confirms to us that it was him and Brian who instigated those votes and told Sukjai to vote for Ted.
Ted doesn't know we instigated those 3 votes for him, and he won't. We've been too true to Ted. The whole tribe has been too true to Ted.
Brian then turns the situation into an opportunity to villainize Jake to Clay and Ted, who agree with him. He acts as if Jake trying to get good with Chewy Gone members in order to stay longer in the game is an immoral act.
What's he thinking? Just come over here and start playing both sides of the fence? That's just bad. That's a bad business decision.
At the reward challenge, Clay helps Brian, and Brian wins. Jeff says he can pick one person to go on the reward with him, so he picks Clay. This looks like a logical choice based on how the reward challenge played out, almost as if he is just returning a favor.
Well, I probably couldn't accomplish this feat without the assistance of someone. So Clay, I couldn't be here without you. You deserve half of this.
This choice, however, causes Ted to question Brian's loyalty to him, and Brian tells us that he will pick whatever alliance he needs to make it further in this game. He doesn't care who it is.
I have to see which option, which plan is going to work best for me down the road. That's part of the plan. That's part of my strategy.
While on the reward, Brian cracks an awkward joke as he usually does in confessionals.
Mr. Clay, sir, I have your elephant, sir, for you. Waiting.
And we proceed to learn that he is deathly afraid of being on top of this elephant, It's the third time we have seen a weakness in him. The other two are when he got drunk and his reaction to his wife.
On here? No briefing, no instruction, no, okay, safety, here's what's gonna happen.
Any seatbelts?
Riding the elephant itself was a little spooky and very uncomfortable.
Back at camp, Jake is talking up Helen and trying to convince her to flip. He says that as things stand, Brian and Clay are going to the end and winning. This does seem to raise suspicion with Helen, as some of the things that he knows and is saying are things that would have had to have come from members of Chewy-Gon. Like, he couldn't have known some of this information without getting it from them.
Well, and the only way anybody can win this game at this point is to get rid of at least one of those guys, and possibly two. You could probably win it over Clay. I'm not sure you can win it over Brian.
No, I don't either.
So,
upon returning from the reward, Brian says everyone looked like lost sheep waiting for their master.
They all were out in the water waiting for us like lost sheep, longing for their masters.
Him and Clay then do this awkward routine where they sing about how they are Santa Claus bringing back food.
Here comes Santa Claus, here comes Santa Claus, right there, Santa Claus.
Helen wins immunity, so now the former Chewy-Gon members get their pick on who goes home. In a strange vote, Penny goes home 4-2-1. Jake votes for Jan, while Brian, Ted, Helen, and Jan all vote for Penny, but Penny and Clay vote together for Jake. It's very confusing because nothing was presented as why this happened before it happened. Clay had to know that Penny was going home, so it seems like this could possibly be a move to get her jury vote by voting with her. However, Brian is in the majority and is safe once again, and they are now up 5-1.
Penny, the tribe has spoken.
Episode 11 is a recap episode, so we won't look at that since it isn't part of the overall story, as much as it is simply bonus content like you would find on a movie's DVD or Blu-ray. Episode 12 starts off with a second family visit, except this time they are in person. Brian actually legitimately seems happy to see his wife this time, which is a stark contrast from a couple episodes ago.
Brian, say hello to your wife, Cece.
Hey, baby!
Brian's wife does not win the reward, but Helen's husband does instead, and as part of that reward, he gets to spend 24 hours with Helen and the tribe. Him and Helen go out on the boat, and while discussing strategy and the endgame, Helen says that Brian is trustworthy and fair, unlike Clay.
I see what I'm up against. See, Brian will play fair and with integrity. Clay won't. Clay's out for Clay. He's a selfish son of a gun.
An interesting side note is how Helen's husband tells her that she should cut Brian then. Based on everything she's telling him, she should cut Brian since he is more likely to win.
Maybe you don't need Brian. Get rid of the person that's the biggest threat.
I just wouldn't feel right doing that.
But Helen has bought what Brian is selling and disagrees with her husband. Her husband is right though.
I thought she would do anything for the $1 million, and she said, well, I also want to do what's right. And I was a little surprised by that.
I trust Brian. Brian's an upfront guy. I don't trust Clay.
After the immunity challenge, Helen is ready to start cutting Chewy-Gon members and wants to target Clay. Brian hears her out, but he doesn't commit to anything, putting into practice what he says is one of the most important parts of Survivor.
I don't trust Clay. I don't. I'm sorry. Do you feel that he has earned, through merit, a number 1 or 2 spot?
After that, Brian tells us that this is a game of survival and you need to adapt and jump ship accordingly. In an age where morals and loyalty still mean a lot in Survivor, this is smart, but it's villainous.
You've got to keep your mind open and then adapt accordingly. Switch, jump ship here, because it's a game of survival. I mean, this is a game.
Ultimately, Clay is kept safe for one more day, and Jake, the last member of Sukjai, is voted out.
Jake, the tribe has spoken. Time for you to go.
Episode 13 begins and all that remains are the 5 Chewy-Gon members. They haven't had to vote anyone out since Gandia on day 12 from their own tribe, but it is time for them to start eating their own. They have exhausted all other options. And Brian knows this. He explains how in this game you have to make friendships and cut them off. You have to string people along.
Can't lose your cool. You gotta be like ice. You're gonna have friendships, you gotta cut off those friendships. You gotta keep stringing people along and bam, throw them a nice slider.
After that, Ted is talking to Brian about what happens next and has been blissfully unaware that Brian's allegiances switched in episode 9 from Ted to Clay. And why wouldn't they? Who is easier to beat at the end? The lovable guy who claims everyone is family, or the guy who everyone dislikes and suspects he could want to cut them in a heartbeat if it meant just him getting closer to the $1 million?
I trust Brian. I don't think Brian would ever look at me and try to dupe me on something, play me up for a fool, and I wouldn't do that to him.
What everyone has not suspected is that Brian is acting like Ted on the outside, but it's actually more like Clay on the inside.
Mr. Freeze is in the house, even though it's about 110 out here.
Anyways, the conversation with Ted still has him liking Brian, but he senses that Brian's loyalties are wavering.
Don't take anything personal. Everything is based on business. Well, when I did a checkpoint of our status, he wavered a little bit. He kind of wavered a little bit.
At the reward challenge, everyone is playing for a brand new vehicle, and Brian is working hard to win. Despite how well off we saw him with his very nice vehicles and the fact that we know he is a used car salesman, this new car seems to mean a lot, and Brian has this in the bag.
What are you spelling?
Road trip.
That's not road trip.
But he blows it on a misspelling, and Ted wins. Brian looks stupid in the process. After winning the new vehicle, Jeff tells Ted to pick one person to go on the reward with him, and he picks Helen. Brian is not happy about this at all, feeling like Ted owed him because he basically gave Ted the answer to win.
I didn't even get a thanks. Should have thanked me. Anybody that gives you something for free. I was that one who was, hey, thanks, appreciate it.
Later on, Jan is talking to Helen and reveals out loud for the first time what Brian's game is with Clay, and something we haven't even heard from Brian himself.
Brian has played a very good game. Yes, he has. I have no problem with him.
Why do you think he keeps Clay so close? Keep your friends close, you keep your enemies closer.
This could put a target on Brian since Jan and Helen now know what his end game is. All they need to do is tell Ted and they can vote out Brian 3-2. After that, Helen is out on the boat with Brian, complaining about Ted, and Brian tells us that she could be playing both sides, but she isn't because she respects him, and he says that she owes him.
Helen could very well be playing me, but at the same time, she won't. Helen is somebody that respects me completely.
However, this is immediately contrasted by Helen saying she is definitely playing both sides of the fence.
I'm definitely playing two sides of the fence. Yeah, that's what you gotta do. And I would bet you to a person everybody out here is playing both sides of the fence. Just hope you don't get caught.
She owes me, and she knows it.
It is all for naught though, as Brian wins individual immunity for the first time all season, ensuring his safety.
Walk on up, Brian. Nice job. Brian wins immunity.
Back at camp, Ted asks Brian, brother to brother, if he is being voted out. Brian says no, and this is a blatant lie to Ted's face.
Honestly, I'm asking you brother to brother. Okay. Mine and next to go.
Yeah. We then get a monologue from Brian about how him knowing where people's heads are in this game gives him control.
When you know where everyone's head's at, it gives you that much more control. It gives you that much more confidence. It gives you a little bit more useful ammunition.
He starts by saying Jan is essentially disposable.
One, I've got my trump card. Jan, Grandma Jan, she's disposable.
He then says he knows Helen and Clay don't like each other, so he will pit them against each other.
A good friend, Uncle Clay. I know what he wants, he knows what I want. I know he doesn't want Helen, I know Helen doesn't want him. When I need to use that against each other, I will.
And lastly, he flips us off.
One disposable, the loyal soldier, oops, and the good friend.
At Tribal, Brian flips on Ted and votes him out of the game. This is smart for his endgame of getting him and Clay to the end, but bad because he had just lied to Ted's face in an era where that can lose you someone's vote very easily.
Ted, the tribe has spoken.
Time for the finale. It is Brian versus Clay versus Helen versus Jan. One will take home the title of sole survivor and the $1 million prize. As the finale starts, Brian is looking at the voted out players and reminds us that his head is still in this game.
When I was making those reads, all I thought about was, you've come a long way, baby. My attire is just beard and bathing suits out here, but I'm still in business mode.
At the same time though, he also arrogantly pats himself on the back. It is immunity time, and once again, Brian wins, making it back-to-back challenges and guaranteeing his spot in the final three.
Brian wins immunity!
Brian decides that his next target is Helen, and this is in large part due to her having secret conversations with Ted in the sand before Ted was voted out that looked like they were drawing up strategic plans without him in the sand. At this point in time, Helen is his strongest opponent. However, Helen was not plotting against Brian, she was plotting against Clay.
It looks like it's time for Helen to go. It just happened the other day. There was some writing on the ground, so I have a little distrust in Helen. Helen's got to go now. simply because she's a threat to me.
Brian tells Jan the plan, and she begins to get emotional over the thought of voting Helen out, and Brian tells her to not get emotional over this. For some reason, Jan had it in her head that she was going at 4, and Brian informs her that, hey, it isn't your turn yet.
Jan, you know where the vote's going, correct? No. It's not your turn.
After that, Helen checks with Brian and Clay that it is still Jan going. They tell her they don't want to talk about it since they don't want to seem insensitive. However, she mentions that when it was time to vote at Ted, they told her straight up, yeah, we're voting at Ted. That's what's happening. So this change in tone and the way they're answering has her feeling like she may be the next to go.
It worries me that they may decide that Jan is an easier person to keep along.
At Tribal Council, the plan is executed and Helen is voted out, leaving only Brian, Jan, and Clay.
Helen, the tribe has spoken. It's time for you to go.
In Helen's final words, she tells us that Brian lied to her. Since these are her parting words, it seems likely that this will come into play at the final Tribal Council.
Especially since I asked Brian directly if I should plan on coming back tonight, and I was given an emphatic yes.
The next day, we have our final immunity challenge, and in past seasons, this has meant a test of endurance for 3 of the 4 seasons. And once again, it is a test of endurance, but it's not the classic putting your hand on an idol and just willing your way to victory by being on it longer than anyone else. No, in this challenge, you have to hold gold coins between your fingers while standing in a very uncomfortable position in a cave that is very, very hot. If you let any of the gold slip through your fingers, you lose. It takes only 12 minutes before Jan drops, followed by Clay, meaning Brian wins individual immunity number 3 and guarantees himself a spot in the final 2 at the final Tribal Council.
3rd time in a row. Take it.
Feel good?
Now historically, whoever wins the final immunity challenge goes on to lose the game. Kelly Wentworth loses to Richard Hatch 3-4, Colby Donaldson loses to Tina Weston 3-4, Kim Johnson loses to Ethan Zahn 2-5, and Nalia Dennis loses to Vesepia Towery 3-4. So Brian is not in a historically good spot. However, similar to Colby Donaldson, he is set up very well to win, just as long as he picks the right person to go to the end with. He ends up voting out Jan, which leaves him with the most unlikable person from Chewy to go up against.
Jan, the tribe has spoken.
Brian feels a little bit more cocky than usual and does one more awkward joke before our final Tribal Council.
It's okay. Excellent job, sir. Thank you. Good job to you too. Appreciate that.
On the way to Final Tribal, he tells us how this is strictly a game and the relationships are just not real to him.
This is strictly a game to me. It was about building relationships and cutting your losses to move on to the next level, to get to a certain position.
Clay then says what everyone on Chewy has said all season. Brian is a class act. Going into Final Tribal, we know this is not true at all.
Everybody respects Brian. He's a class act.
Welcome to your final Tribal Council.
It is time. Final Tribal Council. Time to own up to your game and make the jury feel good about giving you the $1 million prize and representing the season that they're on as their winner. Brian's opening speech is pretty good, all things considered. He takes the time to compliment the jury, however, he doesn't take the opportunity to claim his strategy. Instead, he goes for the emotional vote by saying his goal in this game was to make sure everyone was fed and warm, and he wants them to vote from their heart.
Vote from your hearts and look at the whole time that we've either known each other and feel good about it.
It's just a lot of BS from Brian, but it works for this jury. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. The first juror is Erin from Sukjai. She asks them what is one reason to not vote for the other person to win the $1 million. Brian takes the easy approach and tackles Clay's work ethic.
Because over a period of, say, 39 days, he did not put forth the effort that he could have.
Which had become a point of contention all season, at least among the Chewy members, especially with Helen. However, Erin votes for Clay since she feels like he is more honest.
I'm basing my vote on honesty And Clay, I feel that you have been honest to everyone. On the other hand, I do not feel Brian has.
She's correct. Clay is more honest, and Brian is down 0-1. Next up is Ken from Sukjai, and this is an interesting one. Apparently, a conversation happened at some point in time between him and Brian talking about Ted. Now, we never saw it on the show, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Brian plays dumb about it, but Ken swears it happened.
Remember, I know the answer to this. You told me this, so just tell the jury what you told me.
And if you look at their characters, Brian has lied all game, and Ken has been an honest and noble person. Whereas Brian, he's just take noble and honest and flip it on its head. So we have to take Ken's word. It probably did happen. Brian claims to not recall this at all, and Ken votes for Clay. Brian is down 0-2.
I didn't never mention Ted had to go.
Did you get the honesty?
No, I did not.
Penny is the third juror and also from Sukjai. She asked each of them what they learned about her. Just name some things they learned about her. She even asked Brian some questions to lead him to, obvious answers, such as where is she from, does she have an older sibling, stuff like that.
You've got an older brother or an older sister.
No, I'm the oldest.
Brian completely botches this and proves he has learned nothing at all about her in the 11 days they were on the same beach. Clay, on the other hand, does very well as he proves that he learned a lot about her and wins her vote. Brian is now down 0-3.
That Clay really took the time to get to know me as a person the 12 days I had with them, and Brian never did.
The fourth juror is Jake from Sukjai. Something that was kind of glossed over in this story is how Brian and Jake had formed a friendship, but Clay attacked Jake earlier for trying to play both sides. Clay did this openly while Brian did this behind Jake's back. Jake asked Clay why he attacked him openly, and Clay claims that he was parroting what Brian said. However, he does this in the final tribal by attacking Jake.
You was trying to play me with all of my own tribe members, and you didn't think we wasn't going to talk? You were wrong.
And Brian essentially says that, hey, he liked Jake.
I was working hand in hand with you. You were out there clamming with me, getting food. No, at the time I did not feel the same way.
Brian earns Jake's vote and is down 1-3. Ted is the fifth juror and the first from Chewigon. He comes in hot by telling Brian that everything Brian was saying was a lie, and he sold Ted a bunch of lemons, just as a used car salesman does.
You sold me your friendship, and most of all, you sold me your word, all to find out that each one of those qualities were lemons.
However, Ted heard from Helen that Clay made racist remarks against him, and Clay claims that this is untrue, or at least if he had made a racist remark, he doesn't recall doing it, and he didn't mean to.
You've never made any racist comments
about you?
Me.
No, I didn't. If I did, I sure didn't mean to.
Now, we never saw any of these racist remarks from Clay about Ted on the show if he had made one, so it's very possible Clay did make it and didn't even realize he was making it. It seems very believable based on what we know about Clay.
100% fair with me. Brian, is that true?
No.
However, Ted doesn't like Clay's answer and gives his vote to Brian, what he considers the lesser of two evils.
My word was my bond, and it's pitiful that you didn't know that, but that you are the lesser of the two evils.
Clay's lead has shrunk 2-3. Jan is the sixth juror, and she asked each of them about the work they did around camp all season. Now the second time we've talked about Clay's work ethic, and Brian claims the work he did, which was much more than Clay's, and Jan votes for him. The votes are now tied 3-3. Helen is the final juror, and she is raging mad. She says that Brian lied to her. He claims she was plotting with Ted against him, and she says she wasn't. She was plotting to get rid of Clay. She says that if she was ever going to vote Brian out, that she would have told him to his face.
It really hurt. You duped me, you made a fool of me, you strung me along, and you let me sit here and get stunned.
Brian remains calm and smartly apologizes and claims he was in the wrong.
Yes, I did it out of anger, and I admit it. I completely admit I was not honest with you.
Helen then rips into Clay and asks him, what are 3 things he did just in a day to help around camp? Clay botches his question and doesn't even try to answer it, and makes Helen upset in the process.
I asked for 3 reasons on what on a daily basis.
Helen, you don't understand, because I can tell right now, there's no one in the world satisfy your answer.
It is time to reveal the vote.
The winner of Survivor Thailand, Brian.
Brian wins 4-3 in a tight race against a well-disliked person in Clay. A win is a win in the game of Survivor, no matter how you convince the jury, and by how thin of a margin you win. So let's break this down. How is Brian Heidik as a character? In one word, heartless. Despite the occasional breaking character, like when he got drunk or when he got mad about Ted winning the car that Brian would have won if he had just spelled the road trip right, Brian operated very even keel all season. He had good confessionals, and his drunken moment plus his fear of elephants gave us a glimpse into him as a human. However, he clearly lacked emotions or caring for others, as he would say multiple times. He didn't go on the game to make friends, but to win money. In essence, he was like Richard Hatch, but heartless and more arrogant, just more secretly arrogant. Out of 47 character moments shown on the show, 19 were heroic and 28 were villainous, making Brian Heidik a villain in Survivor Thailand. Now, how was Brian as a strategist? He played the game like a robot would. He was on a mission and no relationship was going to get in his way of winning that $1 million. However, this approach almost cost him the game at the same time. He was one vote away from being beat by Clay Jordan, who was generally disliked by almost everyone in the game, at least by everyone on Chewy. Brian's decision to bring Clay along, with Clay botching the final tribal council, may have helped seal a game that otherwise could have been easily lost. Brian was smart, observant, and had a good head for the game, but he clearly needed to learn how to care for others in order to be the best. Out of 60 strategic moments shown on the show, 43 were smart and 17 were dumb, making Brian Heidik a smart strategist on Survivor Thailand. Next time on Once Upon an Island, join us as we walk step by step through the GOAT strategy that Brian Heidik implemented here. Him picking Clay Jordan is very significant in the game of Survivor, and that strategy is still being utilized to this day. Thanks for watching, and if you like the content you see here, then please support me and this channel on Patreon. Your financial support makes this channel possible. Thank you for watching.
The winner of Survivor Thailand, Brian.